She says you are part of the world. Air, water, every living thing is connected to you.
It's a nice thought.
It is.
What does it mean?
It means the only thing keeping you from being happy is the belief that you are alone.
What if that's true?
Then you can change. I think she stands for wisdom. As you live, you learn things.
The greatest Americans have not been born yet. They're waiting patiently for the past to die. Please give blood.
But if we have gone from empathy in blood ties to empathy in religious associational ties to empathy based on national identification, is it really a big stretch to imagine the new technologies allowing us to connect our empathy to the human race writ large in a single biosphere? And what reason would we stop here at the nation-state identity and only have ideological empathy or theological-based empathy or tribal-based blood tie empathy? We have the technology that allows us to extend the central nervous system and to think viscerally as a family.
A global perspective, seeing the world as one. This is not a new idea. We've held it for a very, very long time. Who are we? We are your ancestors, those who have lived before and during your pathetic accounts of history. We have seen life in abundance, have reflected this with our stories. Simply, we've held a story of one. Nothing like the stories of today, the stories of the lost. We are the one culture, the polar opposite of the lost culture. And every one of our understandings, feelings, intentions, and actions reflect the inextricable connection of ourselves and all of life on this planet. The lost cultures? Well, they're afraid. Fearing that this world can't sustain their needs. They think life's a battle between themselves and nature. They're sick, and they need help. Paranoia envelops them.
I was something. What don't you give me?
Sad and confused, they destroy themselves, and even worse, they think this is normal. So they've convinced themselves that our human nature is the nature of the lost. But they don't take into account the whole of history. They don't take into account the history of one. And it might be hard to see, may even be harder to believe, but we, your ancestors, are here to testify. You have lived in harmony. You have lived in peace. You have created values based on affirming life. Since time out of mind, this has been your story. And you only lost it when you failed to write it down, but it has been recovered. And as we present this to you, please digest your holistic history.
But first, let's start from where you are, the story you're probably more comfortable with. Hunter men living in caves, bringing meat home for the tribe before taking possession of their women and dragging them around by the hair. There is a common assumption that every historical civilization has just been a bunch of savages, and any semblance of decency that we have developed since then probably came from some primitive form of male bonding that probably developed through hunting together. After all, weren't our first tools just weapons to kill animals for food or to kill each other for whatever reason? Weren't we just barbaric Neanderthals who competed and fought with each other and the environment for whatever we could grab for ourselves in some sort of wild frenzy, a free-for-all game of musical chairs in which only the toughest and strongest survived? Well, no. When looked at objectively, this paradigm is really nothing but a projection of our current culture backwards through time. In other words, we are looking at the past through the tunnel vision of today's society. The reason the wild frenzy and competitive chauvinistic model of our cultural evolution resonates so strongly with us is because our current society is so immersed in these ideas that many people consider them to be eternal truths. However, anthropological studies suggest that for 95% of our history we lived in non-hierarchical, egalitarian societies. How could this be true and yet go unrecognized? Well, it is well understood that even the world's greatest thinkers have had mental blockages regarding what are simply establishment paradigms of their time. For example, when the slave owners who wrote the U.S. Constitution wrote that all men are created equal, they really meant only men, and only white men who own property. Actually, less than a quarter of the population at that time had the right to vote. And it definitely did not include women, which brings me back to my point about these patriarchal, competitive-based worldviews and ideologies are not something that have been present for our entire history. They are a direct result of our current system, and they are not something that is inevitable for our future. And while women are now legally equal to men, socially perpetuated stereotypes of what it means to be a man or a woman are still strictly enforced in our culture. As James Gilligan, prison psychiatrist, puts it, our cultural climate turns men into objects of violence and women into objects of sex. The notion that life must naturally be a constant battle between genders, between ourselves and nature, between anyone is a falsehood that we must look past, and we must look outside the scope of our current society in order to find the answers on how to create a sustainable, peaceful culture.
Fasten the fate of your children to the hammered truth of your trigger, a truth that mushrooms its darkened cloud over the rest of us, so that we too bear witness to the short-lived fate of a civilization that worships a male god. Your weapons are phallic, all of them. That dummy that sits on your lap is no longer a worthwhile spectacle. His shrunken pale face leaves little room for imagination. We have spotted your moving lips and have pinned the voice to its proper source. It is a source of madness, a source of hunger, of power, a source of weakness, a source of evil. We have exited your coliseum and are encircling your box office, demanding our families back, our cultures back, our rituals back, our gods back, so that we may return them to their proper source, the source of life, the source of creation, our mother's womb, the great goddess.
I know what you're thinking. If we don't want a man to rule, then why a woman? Woman kill, woman fight. If it isn't a patriarchy, then it'll just be a matriarchy. And while some of these notions are mildly justified in accordance with the current system, we propose another polar opposite. If it isn't ruled by man or woman, then it's a partnership model for society, where men aren't told to be real men.
So what does that mean?
The certain elements that you identify as weakness aren't necessarily weak, in my opinion. Like if I see a guy sobbing, I don't think to myself like, he's not a real man. He's not real man.
And women aren't told that they must have.
Feminine qualities are compassion, empathy, nurturance, sensitivity, also passivity, dependence, powerlessness.
But both genders are seen as equal with the same propensity for human values.
The truth is human qualities are human. There's no such thing as gender attached to a quality.
In our holistic past, evidence clearly shows that our original cultures had this partnership system. And in their eyes, the ultimate reflection of these values was life, and that which gave life, the woman. But we know now that this is nothing but a delusion furthering a stereotype. We all, women and men, have the propensity for peace and play an equal part in creation, be it life, art, technology, whatever. And not only is calling that all-encompassing, beyond comprehension essence a woman or man segregational, it's also anthropocentric. And as we continue to grow and reflect with clear, unpolluted thought, we will see that neither of these ways of thinking are beneficial to our existence or to our vital development of harmony with Earth and every creature inhabiting it.
Our brains are hardwired to adapt our behaviors to survive in the world around us. And regardless of whether we are male or female, Venezuelan or British or Catholic or pagan, the values that we hold are entirely contingent upon our environment and our exposure to new information or situations. And now, keeping this in mind, we can re-examine history in a more objective manner, and taking this approach, we find ample evidence to suggest that the nurturing bond between a mother and a child was a major factor in our cultural evolution, that empathic civilizations have existed, and that this really isn't against our nature as much as it is against our current social structure. Hunter-gatherers, it turns out, were a lot more gatherers than they were hunter. This is evidenced both by the fact that our biology is far better suited to process plants than it is animals, but also by the fact that many of the first man-made artifacts were really not weapons for killing, but containers to hold infants or food, or the tools to prepare food. And tribes operated on a possessionless, egalitarian value system, sharing the fruits of their labor equally among themselves, for they recognized that in order to help themselves, they had to help the group. So now we have a choice. What story will we be telling our grandchildren? Will it be one of domination, of fear, or one of compassion and nurturing, forming a partnership with our fellow humans and the planet? Technological and social evolution tend to become more complex no matter which stories are being told. Many highly advanced technological civilizations of the past, such as the Crete, are evidence of this. But the evolution of the cultural system, and hence whether a social system is warlike or peaceful, sociopathic or empathic, this depends entirely on our own choices and does not always evolve in a linear fashion. In our current dominator paradigm, there is a despicable focus on the development of technologies created solely for the purpose of destruction and domination, in contrast to technologies created in a partnership or empathic model that sustain life. Never has the clash between technological and cultural evolution been so apparent in our own endangered time. The brutal and barbaric aberrations of a species turned against itself. To quote Rianne Eisler, "Our minds have been stunted, our hearts have been numbed, and yet our striving for truth, beauty, and justice has never been extinguished. What may lie ahead is the final bloodbath of this system's pathetic, likely violent last attempt to maintain itself and the whole it's created for all of us. But these death throes can also be seen as the birthing pains of a new future, a union between cultural, social, and technological evolution that has only now been made possible by our newly globally interconnected world. These circumstances are completely novel to the history of mankind, for the first time allowing us to create a truly global, empathic civilization. We control the direction of our culture, and we control the stories that are being written into history with every passing moment."
She says you are part of the world. Air, water, every living thing is connected to you.
It's a nice thought.
It is.
What does it mean?
It means the only thing keeping you from being happy is the belief that you are alone.
Do you know what it is to feel the light of love inside you? And all the darkness falls away. If you feel the way I feel, then I believe we have the answer that I've been searching for tonight. Love me, baby, shake me like a monkey, baby. Oh, forever I'm yours, 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 yeah. Forever I am. Cigarettes and coffee, broken hearts.
This is my evolution.
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 This is my evolution.